In the last 25 years, the United States government has added over $25 trillion to its national debt. That's more than the entire GDP of the European Union. And for most of that time, the people in charge of managing it have told you the same thing. It's under control. The economy will grow its way out. America has never defaulted, and it never will. But here's what they haven't told you. The US government has no realistic plan to pay this debt back. What it does have is something far more convenient and far more dangerous. A mechanism that quietly transfers the cost of that debt from Washington onto your savings, your wages, and your purchasing power. Without a vote, without a debate, without most people even noticing it's happening. To understand what's actually going on, you first need to understand the scale of the problem. The US national debt currently sits at $34.8 trillion. With a population of around 333 million people, that's over $100,000 of debt for every single man, woman, and child in the country. But the raw number isn't even the scariest part. It's the trajectory. The last time the US government actually made money, spent less than it took in, was 2001. Since then, it has run a deficit every single year without exception, and those deficits aren't shrinking. The Congressional Budget Office projects the annual deficit will grow from $2 trillion in 2024 to $2.8 trillion by 2034. The debt-to-GDP ratio, already at 99%, is forecast to hit 122% within a decade, surpassing even the post-World War II peak. And it's getting worse faster than the projections suggest, because of one factor that most coverage ignores entirely. When the Federal Reserve raised rates from near zero to over 5%, it didn't just slow the economy, it started a slow-motion detonation of the government's balance sheet. The NAMREV rolls the debt over by issuing new bonds. Bonds that now carry interest rates many times higher than the ones they're replacing. The result? Interest payments have already become the third largest line item in the federal budget. This is what a debt spiral looks like in its early stages. More debt means higher interest costs. Higher interest costs mean a larger deficit. A larger deficit means more borrowing. More borrowing means more debt. And on it goes. Now, there are only three ways out of a debt problem this large. You raise taxes, you cut spending, or you inflate the debt away. The first two are politically toxic. Tax rises are unpopular. Cutting Social Security, Medicare, or defense spending is career-ending. No serious political coalition exists in Washington to do either at the scale required. So look closely at the third option, because this is where the plan becomes visible if you're willing to read the data. Inflating away debt is not a theory. It's a proven mechanism, and the US has used it before. After World War II, America carried a debt-to-GDP ratio of over 100%. It didn't pay it down through austerity. It grew and inflated its way out. The mechanics are straightforward. The Federal Reserve creates money and uses it to buy government bonds. This puts new money into the system. More money chasing the same goods pushes prices up. Inflation rises, and crucially, the value of the government's fixed-rate debt, measured in real terms, falls. Think about it this way. In 1970, the median house price in the US was $24,000. The average annual salary was $7,700. A loaf of bread cost 24 cents. Now imagine you'd taken out a $24,000 mortgage in 1970. By today's standards, that's almost nothing, because inflation has multiplied wages and prices many times over. The debt stayed fixed, the economy moved on, the burden evaporated. That is exactly what governments are counting on. The debt is real today. Inflation makes it manageable tomorrow. And the cost, the gap between what was borrowed and what is effectively repaid, is extracted silently from everyone who holds cash, earns wages, or saves in the currency being debased. Here's the part that doesn't make the official briefings. The inflation tax is not random. It is not shared equally. It is a precise, structural transfer of wealth, from savers to debtors, from wage earners to asset holders, from ordinary households to the institutions closest to the money creation mechanism. When the Federal Reserve prints money to buy government bonds, the first people to spend that new money are the government and the financial institutions it transacts with. They spend it before prices have adjusted. By the time the new money filters down to ordinary wages and savings accounts, prices have already moved. The purchasing power has already been extracted. Economists call this the Cantillon effect. It has been documented since the 18th century. It is not controversial in academic literature. It is simply absent from most mainstream coverage of monetary policy. Every time the Federal Reserve expands its balance sheet to accommodate government borrowing, a transfer takes place. Holders of financial assets, stocks, real estate, gold, see their wealth inflate in nominal terms. Holders of cash savings see their purchasing power quietly eroded. The top 10% of American households own over 89% of all stocks. The bottom 50% hold almost none. The inflation tax, by design or by consequence, falls hardest on the people least equipped to avoid it. The Federal Reserve will tell you it targets 2% inflation as a neutral economic management tool. That framing is not wrong. A low, stable inflation rate does encourage spending, keeps debt manageable, and supports growth. The 2% target is not sinister on its own, but 2% compounding over 35 years cuts the value of your savings by more than half. And in periods where deficits balloon, debt spirals accelerate, and the political will to raise taxes or cut spending is absent, the pressure to let that 2% run higher is structural. The 2021 to 2023 inflation surge was not a random event. It was the visible consequence of the largest peacetime monetary expansion in American history, deployed to finance a multi-trillion-dollar spending response to COVID without raising taxes to pay for it. The official line was that it was transitory, supply chain driven, temporary. The data said otherwise, and eventually so did the Federal Reserve, which had to raise rates at the fastest pace in 40 years to bring it back under control. The debt didn't disappear during that period, it grew. What shrank was its real value. Here's who pays. Not the government, which borrowed at fixed rates and repays in devalued dollars. Not the asset holders who watched their portfolios inflate in nominal terms. Not the primary dealers, the hedge funds, or the sovereign wealth managers who can reposition in real time. The cost lands on the person with $50,000 in a savings account, earning 1.5%, while inflation runs at 4%. It lands on the worker, whose wage negotiation happens once a year, while prices move every week. It lands on the retiree, whose fixed pension buys less every year in a world where essential costs, housing, healthcare, food, inflate faster than the headline number suggests. The Congressional Budget Office has confirmed the structural trajectory. The IMF has warned about it. The Federal Reserve's own economists have documented the mechanisms. The political system has not responded with a credible fiscal plan. What it has responded with is the only tool that doesn't require a vote: the money printer, the inflation tax, the silent mechanism by which a government that cannot balance its books transfers purchasing power from the population to the state, and from the bottom of the wealth distribution to the top. Washington will not announce this is the plan, but the data already has. This isn't a prediction about collapse. The dollar won't disappear. America won't default. What will happen, what is already happening, is a gradual, sustained erosion of the real value of everything you've saved and earned in dollar terms. Manageable enough that no single year triggers a crisis. Cumulative enough that over a decade it amounts to a structural transfer of wealth at a scale no tax policy could achieve openly. The debt is $34.8 trillion. The deficit is growing. The interest bill is compounding. The political will to fix it fiscally doesn't exist. The plan isn't to pay it back. The plan is to make it worth less. And you're the one holding the currency.